What happens when you combine the most innovative, eccentric, and charismatic leaders, disruptors, and founders from tech with the pedigree and history of one of the most established institutions within the City of London? The Searching for Mana podcast will be produced in partnership with the London Stock Exchange. I'm Lloyd Wildhead, the host of Searching for Mana. We're going to be interviewing some of the leaders, influencers, and disruptors in the tech space, where I'm going to be trying to dig in and find out what's their mana, their superpower, their magic.
Welcome to Searching for Mana. I'm your host, Daniel O'Riordan, alongside my colleague, Sachin Doshi. Hey, Sachin.
Hey, Dan.
We're delighted to be joined today by one of the preeminent product leaders in, I'd say, the fintech and the payment space. Our guest was previously Chief Product Officer at Currencycloud and was an integral part of their acquisition by Visa a couple of years ago. As a result, he's now the global head of product for Visa cross-border solutions. Piers Marais. Piers, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'd like to, if I may, just launch straight into your Currencycloud story. So can see that you joined Currencycloud quite early on in their journey back in 2017 as a product owner.
Correct. So I came from actually outside of financial services. I worked as a product manager in the global maritime tech space and joined Currencycloud in 2017 as a product manager for the payments team, the singular payments team that existed at Currencycloud back in 2017. I think there were about 90 of us in Currencycloud at that point in time. And obviously we have been through a bit of an evolution and a journey since then, but very, very, very fond memories. It feels like yesterday, actually, that I entered into this brand new world of financial services from global maritime tech, despite it being, good 6 years ago now.
What was it that, because as you say, that's a pretty different jump in terms of sector and background. What was it about Currencycloud or perhaps fintech which appealed to you at the time?
So I think at that time, if I think back, it was maybe a couple of years after the launch of players like Revolut and Monzo, some of those really progressive neobanks, challenger banks, digital banks. And being a Londoner who was fortunate enough to be able to go and travel abroad from time to time, there was this kind of attraction to this new wave of digital banks that were really trying to change the perception of what banking was, and particularly add this spin of improving that journey when traveling in different countries. And they'd been in the product management role for about 3 years in the global maritime tech company. And as you can probably imagine, it was a fairly niche part of the industry, and had really stumbled accidentally on this love of product management, but realized quite quickly that the opportunities perhaps in a more niche sector like the one I was in were more limited. And it was that combination of seeing some of these pretty cool progressive new digital banking apps start to emerge, and the kind of the love of product management, but the desire to do more, that really prompted me to look elsewhere. And again, stumbled upon Currencycloud at that point in time, and quickly found out that we were powering huge numbers of those sort of progressive digital financial institutions that were emerging at that point in time.
And you've gone on quite a journey with Currencycloud, as I say, starting with them as a product owner and then eventually coming through to being the Chief Product Officer in the whole business. So your role evolved, no doubt, as the company evolved, and to have been on that journey as the company grew must have been something quite amazing to see firsthand at the coalface.
Incredibly exciting, and actually, as I said, 6 years feels like it's passed in the blink of an eye. It really feels like yesterday, actually, that I remember very, very clearly kind of interviewing at this sort of fintech called Currencycloud back then. But it's been an absolutely fantastic journey and set of opportunities in a hyper-growth business. So as you said, I started in a product management role. I was sitting and leading sort of the payments team for Currencycloud at that point in time. And being part of that hypergrowth business, we scaled fairly quickly. I suppose I think about it as joining at the end of a startup and really then being part of that key scale up period before the acquisition by Visa in 2021. And really kind of cut my teeth with on the international payments component of the wider cross-border offering and platform that we have. And sort of spent some time, I guess, but trying to become the subject matter expert from a payments perspective, learning from as many people as I could internally and externally in the wider market about an incredibly complex and highly regulated space. And over time, progressed into a senior product manager role, and ultimately then penultimately into a product director role, where I started to take on the line management of product managers as well as the individual contribution role. And then ultimately in May this year, our previous CPO moved on to pastures new, and I had the opportunity to apply for and thankfully then get the role to lead the product team at Currencycloud, and now as head of product at Visa Cross-Border Solutions.
Fantastic. And you mentioned about your role began to evolve into, and you began to take on that line management responsibility. I often find when I'm talking to people like yourself, leaders in the space, and you're looking through their journey, perhaps slightly earlier, when they're certainly an expert, like a subject matter expert, and they often then are at that point where they either become, I guess, what would be called in engineering terms a principal, or they become a manager. Did you know at sort of quite an early stage that you did want to go down the journey of becoming a people manager as well as a product expert?
This can sometimes sound a bit cliched, but I've always loved to help other people. And perhaps that's why I ended up in a product management role in itself, in that I get a buzz out of understanding some of the challenges, the problems, the things that people want to try and achieve, and to do my best to try and help them with whatever tools or techniques perhaps that I've got my disposal to try and assist them with. And I suppose I've always thought about this from a similar perspective in terms of being able to coach other product managers. I absolutely get a kick out of seeing other people become incredibly successful hopefully through some small element of coaching that I might be able to help them with. And I say frequently, I hope my reports would say, my team would say the same thing, but I say frequently to my team that success genuinely looks like for me in them moving on to heads of products or CPO roles at other businesses. I think especially in this day and age, there are very few people who are in my team, if any, who will be retiring at the current business that they work at. This is a journey for all of us. There are lots of different stepping stones that we each have to navigate in that journey. And I really, really believe that success for me is my team, direct team, indirect team, moving on to some incredible new roles and to building those kind of connections across the industry. So I actually don't view the difference between types of businesses through that lens. I would see this through the collective mindset that the business wants to take on, actually. So I think that you can still you can still be innovative, you can still disrupt as a large enterprise. There is nothing stopping large enterprises doing that versus startups or scale-ups. And in actual fact, there are lots of startups and scale-ups who actually don't disrupt, they don't innovate, they don't move the needle, and ultimately may fail. So I actually think that the crux here of disruption comes back to the collective mindset. It's the culture and the collective behaviors and attitudes that exist within a business of any shape or size. And that comes down, I think, is probably comes down in large parts to things like the core values, the leadership principles that we have at this case, in our case at Visa, the mission statements, right? What is it that drives everyone on that same path towards the same ultimate set of goals? And I do come back to the fact that can happen anywhere. Yes, it can perhaps be harder to do at a very, very large business, but there are still lots of ways in which you can get even huge numbers of people to be rallying around that same North Star, to be pushing in the same direction, and to still have the feeling and the ability to go and innovate and to disrupt.
Well, I guess you've seen that firsthand, and I'll make this my final question. I'll hand over to Sachin, but you've obviously been in that 90-person early stage and experienced that, and now you're in what is by any measure a large enterprise. So, and you talk about how it is possible to have that kind of culture in a Visa, say, and what's been the what have been the main differences, if any, that you've noticed during the acquisition experience and as you've joined and become part of Visa?
I think it's probably fair to say that people going through some types of acquisitions may have some sense of fear or anxiety at earlier stages, pre or even earlier stages post acquisition, that the things that they did well or the cultural aspects that they signed up to perhaps may start to change, may start to evolve. And I talk about this a lot with my teams, that any evolution of culture is not from necessarily one singular trigger event, like an acquisition or maybe an IPO or whatever else. This is about the result of scale and of hyper growth and of continually trying to push the bar. So yes, things change in a growing company, but if you have that desire and that collective mindset to continue to be successful, to continue to grow, then that evolution has to be something that is part of the course. You have to have a set of people around you who can adapt to those set of changes. And again, I come back to that any evolution of culture or behaviors has not been part of the singular trigger event of the acquisition. It is simply the result of scale, of hyper growth and being successful, and that we have to adapt in order to continue to be successful. We have to adapt. We have to think about our product, our processes, our people, and importantly, think about the culture that binds all of those people together. I think I have been very, very lucky to be part of a really values-led business at Currencycloud. We had 3 values of be human, own it, and better together when I joined 6 years ago, and they were the same 3 values that permeated through everything that we did 4 years later when we were acquired. With Visa, we have 4 leadership principles, which are lead courageously, obsess about your customers, collaborate as one Visa, and execute with excellence. And there is massive overlap between those 4 principles and the 3 values that we held dear to our hearts previously. And that's why I say I'm lucky. I think we have ended up actually as part of now the wider Visa group in a really principle-led and values-led business that ultimately is striving for similar types of success and goals and ambition as we had as Currencycloud as a startup and scale up. And I guess it's no coincidence that the acquisition has been so successful, because as you say, there's been a real synergy between Visa's mantras and Currencycloud's. Correct. We are almost 2 years post acquisition, and I think that there are some inevitable hurdles and steps that every acquired entity needs to go through. I think that is inevitable in any sector with any merger or acquisition. But I do come back to that cultural element that binds people together. It helps people get through some of the potentially more difficult times that are inevitable in any business environment, any personal environment. There will always be ups and there will always be downs. But you have to know that you have to remember that after a down, there will always be another up. And I think you can come back to things like cultural values or the leadership principles that we now have as that glue that really helps bring together huge groups of people in many different time zones across multiple different continents to try and achieve that singular objective that we're all after. Fantastic.
That's a fascinating journey, Piers, and one that it's great to see as you both mentioned that there's been such a successful overlap in terms of values and principles between both Visa and obviously what they saw in Currencycloud, as part of the acquisition. I'd love to kind of drill it back a little bit to kind of your early days at Currencycloud, but more functionally as product, and the evolution of product as a function, and what's both within payments and open banking, generally within the fintech ecosystem and landscape over the past few years. How is that morphed, and what did it look like when you first joined Currencycloud, for example, to today's world?
Yeah, great question. So if I think back to when I started, we were set up as a product org in 2017 as very much domain-led. So I looked after payments, colleague looked after the FX product, for example, et cetera, et cetera. And it must have been about 2018, 2019, perhaps. our new at that time Chief Revenue Officer, helped introduce the concept of pods, which are a group of cross-functional people that all rally around a particular client segment. So it might be that you have a group of people all obsessing about UK digital banks, for example, as a target client segment. And that pod was comprised of new business sales executives, account managers, customer success managers, marketing people, in some cases compliance people as well, but importantly, product managers. And it was at that time, with this introduction of pods from a go-to-market perspective, that product managers started, when at Currencycloud at that point in time, we decided to put in this dual function or kind of dual set of perspectives for a product manager. So every product manager continued to be domain focused, payments, collections, FX in our examples. And a huge part of that is being customer driven and leading customer discovery from a domain perspective. But we added this second set of activities to a product manager's day-to-day life, which was working with the go-to-market teams, those cross-functional pods, to go and obsess about discovery, but from a different angle, from a customer segment perspective. And so the result of this was that you get this matrix setup where you have really capable product managers thinking about the world from a domain perspective. Let's call that the horizontal. But you then have the vertical, which is the different client segments that you either currently serve or choose to, or want to think you've got the right to go and to service in future. And you had product managers helping those go-to-market teams use some of their discovery skills to help really go deep on particular client segments and really understand why we had some levels of product market fit and what we needed to do more of to achieve greater levels of product market fit. And that was, I think, probably the first transformational or step change, let's say, from in my product management career at Currencycloud, to have that secondary set of activities really included as fundamental key parts of your day-to-day job. I think if we fast forward now to as we've scaled, that we have a product team of 20 to 25 product people, and we are continuing to be domain focused in that we have a domain driven design set up with our technical organization. So Scrum teams are still organized and set up from a domain driven perspective. But in addition to that, we are looking at how we are continuing to look at how we evolve that secondary focus. So we do have certain product people still thinking about the world from that client first or segment first perspective. But as we've grown, as we've continued to sort of think about product management post acquisition, we're also invariably spending much more time thinking about proposition development. How do we continue to stitch together the various different products, features, capabilities to provide holistic solutions to different verticals, to different client segments than we perhaps have done so previously?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more then. I think if I look at the vast majority of conversations and the themes that kind of run through that when we talk to founders about product, it's one of the most common themes, and what you mentioned is that kind of almost acting as a conduit between technology going in and almost that commercialization of product as a function. And so, where historically 10 years ago it was about building a particular vertical and just sitting kind of in and building the platform, it seems to have significantly morphed into, right, how can we go out and genuinely disrupt, taking it from being the technical leader, but also taking customer feedback and building that right off the next stage.
Correct. And I think we've always thought of product management as that intersection between the business, the customer, technology. And in many respects, that's not changed, at least in our DNA, for quite some time. But I do think this, I suppose, the API-led wave of innovation that has happened over the past 10 years or so has allowed actually product management as a function to think differently, to think about the world from a more composable way. We've always talked at Visa Cross-Border Solutions and Currencycloud as our modular API suite, as a set of Lego bricks that can be pulled together to form different kinds of models. And that API economy has allowed that to happen. But as a result, the role of product management, I think, does start to change, because there is more opportunity to more quickly bring new propositions to life than ever before. And while there is huge opportunity in that, that also poses a different set of challenges for a product manager to perhaps be pulled in those quite different directions of being domain-led, working or thinking about the world from a specific domain within the platform, to then focusing on specific verticals or target segments, and having to have that end-to-end platform understanding, but in a particular niche or specific market.
That's incredibly interesting insights. Thank you.
That probably concludes point 3. I mean, is there more to be said, do we think, on like current climate and what's coming up, guys?
I'd love to talk about a bit about the future actually as well. I think there's probably a whole nother podcast on AI, but I think there's some of the things that product people need to think about perhaps.
Yeah, great stuff. So
I can almost kind of, it's almost an extension of the question of like, well, what's happened and then what's coming up. And so if we sort of fast forward now and look at what the current climate is and going into 2024 and beyond, and there's going to be new regulations kind of being put into place, but how does today's tech landscape or tech stack or climate sort of play into what the future in the next couple of years could look like?
Yeah, so I think, as we've probably touched on, we've come through that wave of the customer centricity, customer focused approach, maybe product led growth as well. Certainly from a fintech perspective, we are in that era of partnership, of collaboration, in my opinion, all enabled by that API economy that we have talked about. But I think for a really, really important area for product managers over the very near term future, in perhaps all sectors, but certainly relevant in financial services, is in AI, generative AI, and the kind of proliferation of data and data abilities, insights and analytics that I think are starting to be absolutely critical to everything that we do. We are now in the era of not just cheap data storage, but cheap data manipulation. Tools like ChatGPT are bringing incredible tooling like artificial intelligence and machine learning to the masses now in ways that are accessible, cheap, easy to access. AI, ML as concepts are not new. They have been around for decades. Indeed, Visa has been applying AI machine learning techniques to VisaNet for the past 30 years or so. But I think it is this access to tooling, to the ability to digest, to manipulate huge data sets, that is going to be absolutely transformational for product management as a function going forward. There are wider challenges for the industry, certainly in financial services. The role that AI plays, and particularly generative AI plays from a highly regulated landscape in things like anti-money laundering and fraud management. But I think more generally from a product manager's perspective, we are seeing, I don't know about you, but I'm certainly reading lots of posts about how best to use AI as a product manager, how to make your day-to-day life quicker, easier, more transformational. But we have to think really, really carefully about how this starts to intersect with absolutely every activity that we're doing. It's not just about how do we leverage AI within the actual software development process. It is how do you become well-versed and practiced in using AI and generative AI to fundamentally 10x the role that you're currently doing today. And I think that the next wave of very successful product people will be the ones who have learned how to use this incredible new set of tools to fundamentally transform what they are able to do on a day-to-day basis and to provide that multiplier impact for their businesses and ultimately for the clients that they serve.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. My LinkedIn feed and Twitter feed is constantly being refreshed with ChatGPT cheat sheets and everything else. Right? But I think speaking to an investor yesterday where this point actually came up, and he made an interesting point where it's how you utilize that to still go back to the fundamental stage of solving an issue, right? And utilizing AI to be best in class to solve that issue, but still having that fundamental to what you said earlier. It's about the culture and all following the North Star, but trying to go out and actively continue to solve that issue that you set the business up for.
Correct. And I always talk about I guess, AI taking me from 0 to 6, but from 6 to 10 is something that I then need to go and overlay with my own approach, my own view, my own sort of subjective opinions, perhaps. And I think if we think about product management as an art and a science, while there are huge numbers of ways to kind of leverage quant data and what you're doing as a product manager, a huge dollop of product management is also about conversation. It's about really finding those nuances in tone, in body language, in the emotion that someone might speak about as the end customer or user of a product or service. And I'm sure that will be disrupted in some way by some form of artificial intelligence at some point in future. But for now, the role of product management is really to get, I think, with AI, is to get from 0 to 6 incredibly quickly, and then to continue to use those human skills that are still unique to humans to get you from the remainder of the way from 6 to 10.
I think it's that it seems to be it's quite a classic kind of mantra that's being thrown around now, but it's about like AI isn't going to replace your job, but somebody or a company that embraces AI will, or will take it, or will be the industry leader.
Exactly. And I think there is that old adage that 40% of the jobs that will exist when our collective children are at working age, for example, or our grandchildren are at working age, don't exist today. Now, I can't give you the quote from where 40% came from. That may or may not be accurate, but I think the point still stands that if you think about revolutions and evolutions over the history of mankind, we have continued to find new ways to provide, I guess, value in what we can do as human beings. And this now starts to sound quite meta, but I'm sure there will be some potential roles that are at risk. But I think it comes back to then leaders of businesses to think about the sustainability of their businesses and the responsibility to their people that they have, and to give those people the opportunities to leverage their skills in new and different ways than perhaps making huge swathes of businesses redundant, as an example.
Yeah, like constant upskilling, retraining, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
As Dan said, couldn't agree with you more there. It's a really nice segue into here's how you've built your teams over the years, and particularly in today's climate. Yes, product can be a very specific function. You're actively looking for certain skill sets, certain key criteria when you go and hire on various levels. But are there things in particular that you look for or assess that you may not read on a resume, or you may not read on a candidate report, particularly in this climate?
So I guess I have a few key areas that I come back to when hiring and as a hiring manager. The first is what I call the 3 A pluses. So, and this is full credit to my predecessor. We talked a lot about this in the years gone by, but I talk about it now as the 3 A pluses. We want people who have got high accountability. We want people who've got high autonomy and who have got high agency. We want people who can take full responsibility for their actions, for their outcomes. We want them to be able to make decisions independently. We want them to be able to come and tell us as leaders what we need to do next as a product org and as a business. And we want people, I guess, to be able to shape their own outcome and to act on it, not just to react to what is happening around them and around us, but to really seize the opportunities that continue to come before every single one of us. So I talk about it as the three A's, or the 3 A pluses, because we want people who embody those things in huge doses. That's the first area. I think the second area for me, we've touched on it earlier, but is the cultural side of this. Yep. We want people who will live and breathe the values, the leadership principles that we use in everything that we do as Visa. That is incredibly important to me. It is something I continue to place huge importance on with all new hires and with my existing team. I genuinely believe that is the glue that binds all of us together, helps us through some of the harder times that will inevitably be there. But that cultural side of things is something that we absolutely push for in the interview process and kind of pick at for people to give us strong examples of where they've demonstrated, for example, those kinds of values or principles. I think the last thing beyond, a product manager just being absolutely well versed in the fundamentals of product management, the fundamentals of agile software development, perhaps as well. It's people who are curious, intellectually curious, open-minded. I was one of those people that didn't come from a financial services background, but we've continued to do that. There are obviously times and places where you need significant domain expertise. But I genuinely believe that smart people with that level of intellectual curiosity are able to go and think about problems in fresh, creative ways. The bringing together of people from different backgrounds and experiences and actually helps you solve those problems in new creative ways. So I think that's the third area beyond the 3 A pluses and the values. It's just that level of intellectual curiosity that they want. They've got a thirst and a desire to ask why, to go and find out more, to become the expert in some of those details and really help solve problems in new, creative, fresh ways.
Some amazing insights there. Thank you.
I think that be curious should be such a sort of core part of anybody who works in not just fintech, but in any disruptive or emerging sector.
Exactly.
Couldn't agree more. So Piers, thanks so much for all of that insight. It's been super interesting to hear, about your journey at Currencycloud, obviously about some of the fantastic things that are happening at Visa and the cultural elements of it. What we're going to finish off with is a part of the show that I've stolen from Lloyd, and it's what we call our quickfire mana round. So I'm going to ask you 4 or 5 questions. We ask all of our guests these, and what we try and do is see if there is a trend in the answers, whether that be towards their vertical or their role. So it's really interesting, and please be as brief or indeed elaborate as much as you want to on the answers. And ultimately then we're looking to find what your mana is, and your mana is your magic, your superpower, and obviously is kind of the basis of the show. So I'll dive straight in. So if you were to appear on the front cover of your preferred publication, whether it's The Economist, the FT, whatever it might be, first of all, what would that publication be? And secondly, what would the message be?
Wow, great question. So my reactive answer is to say I would prefer to be on page 2 or somewhere through the publication, let's say. What would my preferred publication be? So I don't know if this is going to count, and this sounds a little bit highbrow and it's not intended to be, but I have had so much source of inspiration from the Harvard Business Review, right? And I have genuinely gone back to article after article written by absolutely incredible, knowledgeable people who have been there and done that and got the t-shirt along the way. And it is one of those now sort of, I guess, online publications for me, but is incredibly important, or has been incredibly important as a tool within my wider armory of source of inspiration, let's say.
And so, by the way, the page 2 comment, I think some kind of a corporate or business psychologist could have a field day with that.
I'm sure they would.
But what would the message be if you were on even page 2? If it was a feature piece in the Harvard Business Review, what would the message be, do you think?
So I was asked a question the other day in a leadership team offsite about what would my book title be, and it really caught me off guard. And I called it Half Glass Full. And we had to guess. We had to do this anonymously, and everyone had to guess who had said what. And half of the group guessed that was me. So I'm obviously, I come across as a blatantly positive kind of person. But I think it would be a message probably more or better articulated than I've just expressed my terribly named book to be. But it'd be something around that. It is about forcing oneself to see the positive angle in life, actually, in pretty much everything that you do. Because the alternative is to consistently look at the negative. And if you consistently look at the negative, it becomes this, I guess, vicious spiral, downward spiral, where you continue to think negative thoughts. You continue to think that you can't do something from a professional capacity. Ultimately, we're at work for many of the hours that we're awake for. If you're not enjoying it, if you're not having fun, if you're not seeing the positives and the opportunities in what lies in front of you, then I do have to ask, kind of, what is the point?
But people get trapped, don't they, in that, into that spiral, like you say, and it becomes, I think, almost, as you say, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where it's just this negative mindset, and it ends up causing the negative result as well. So yeah, no,
it does.
Glass half full, I think, is a superb title for a book, by the way.
And I will just add to that I'm fully respectful of the many, many different ways that people can be pulled down into those spirals through nothing to do with work, right? We live in this kind of work-life integration. It's not a balance. Everything is actually integrated, right? And there are all sorts of ways that can pull people down into those spirals. But for me, it is about, just trying to see the glass always half full, and seeing the positives and the opportunities.
Love it. I stress this next question, by the way, is very much meant in a business sense, but what's keeping you up at night?
What's keeping me up at night? So the thing that I consistently think about is, how do we continue to scale this product organization in the right way that continues to give my direct and indirect team the opportunities that I believe they want and that they need to have? The world is constantly changing around us. The business is constantly changing. How do we embrace and accept that uncertainty and that change and still have the organizational design and sets of opportunities for everybody? I think it comes back to what we perhaps first started talking about at the start of this session, which is that if you have people who can embrace those opportunities, they will always be positive. They will continue to love what they do and give their best work. It's really important to me then, as I guess the leader of that department and organization, to think about how I continue to do that for them in an ever-changing world.
And I think your passion for that side of things has just resonated right throughout this whole show. I think is just how important it is to provide your people with those opportunities and to keep the environment such that they feel they can thrive in that type of world.
Thank you. I'm glad that comes across. I think there's still way more to do. There's always more to do.
There's more to do.
But I'm glad that comes across.
Our full remember. What habit or mantra, or it could be just a routine, sets you up for your day, Piers?
So this is an easier one. At the end of each week, or just before the start of each week, I think about what I want to go and achieve that week. The night before the next day starts, I think about what I want to go and achieve that next day. And there are, again, probably lots of scholarly articles that can describe this in a better way than I can, but there is something about the subconscious thinking of what you need to go and achieve that makes the actual achievement of the task the next day, when you wake up, you feel like you know exactly not just what you need to do, but how you're going to go and achieve it. And look, there is obviously this balance between completely obsessing about work and thinking about work the entire time. Everyone has to have that switch off ability. But there is something about the act of subconsciously and maybe passively thinking about something in the background without you even realizing it, that allows you to go and achieve something in a far more effective and an easier way than you thought was possible. I know certainly the days that I don't do this, I find, I don't know, a Friday morning far harder to go and achieve that one big thing that I wanted to, than when I do spend just those 10, 15 minutes. Doesn't have to be the night before, just at the end of your working day, thinking about, really clearly articulating what are the 3, 5, whatever it is, things of focus that you need to go and achieve. And I try to do that, per day, per week, per month, per quarter, and ultimately per year.
It's such a simple task, but like you say, I think it's probably surprising how many people probably don't do that, and they're just stuck in the flow of just day by day. And it's one of the things that we really try and push with our guys here at Mana is, the importance of planning your day and planning it the day before, but then just first thing in the morning, then looking at that plan and going, is this still how my day? And it'd be amazing then how more structured the day becomes, but also then allowing for time for ad hoc things to happen as a million and one things will. As you say, if you've got your priorities, then you can be far more productive, I think.
The hardest part of all of that is making that a habit. So it is finding those 15 minutes at the end of the day when actually you've had enough. You just want to, to pack up, or there's someone trying to put another meeting in your diary. The hardest part is actually making that a habit, forcing yourself to do this day after day, week after week. But if you can overcome that kind of human want to procrastinate, to diverge from that habit, then actually I think the act of sort of just thinking about what you need to do next week, tomorrow, or next month actually becomes quite easy.
It ties then into the whole, and again, this is probably another podcast. We'll have to get you back on, Piers. But this ties into, again, the people who do those 15, 20 minutes after the core hours are finished are probably the people that really are enjoying what they're doing ultimately, and they've got a real drive and a passion for what they're doing, I think, and obviously they're proud of what they're achieving, or proud of what they might achieve. So I think again, it probably goes back to creating an environment or being in a job where you do feel like we're doing that shouldn't be a chore necessarily.
Correct. I think there's also this element of high agency, though, right? This has to come back to individuals saying, I want to apply this growth mindset. I do want to go and experience new opportunities, or I do want to take my own career or any part of what you're doing within that career into your own hands. And ultimately, nobody else is really going to help you define what that is. That has to come back to you. And if you're not putting aside that time to really, to deep think, to focus, to think about where you want to get to over a month, over a quarter, over a year, over a decade, nobody else is going to help you do that. And I think if you can find those ways to form those habits, those short habits that become, start as half an hour and then become 15 minutes and might become 5 minutes, they help you force those times in your diary and your working and personal life as well, to really think about what is it that you individually want to go and do next, or to experience next.
100%.
I think that last bit really resonates. I think there's so many aspects that are coachable, right? There are so many things that people can learn, but there are certain qualities and traits that, going back to when you were hiring your team, that you, as you rightly said, agency, you actively look for in prospective candidates, where just to have that innate desire to want to succeed and want to better themselves and grow and put in these kind of sort of habits and best practices to kind of help develop and further the career. And everything else can be coachable, right? Everything else can be, there is a level of development.
Exactly. One of the questions that we always ask in every single interview, and maybe I'm giving away the interview process here, but one of the questions we ask is, what is the difference between a good product manager versus an outstanding product manager? And I would say, in a kind of similar thread to what we've just been talking about, a good product manager, a good professional perhaps, is someone who is coachable. The outstanding ones are the ones who take what they have been coached on, take it into their own hands, and show that high agency, autonomy and accountability to that actually go and execute and move the needle on any of those things.
So you've heard it here, folks. If there's anybody listening who's currently part of the Visa product interview process, you've just been given a massive step forward.
Shouldn't have done that, should I?
Is there a passage in a book, or it might be a general mantra or a quote that's resonated that just keeps you generally motivated, or is one that you draw from regularly?
There is a quote that I've pinned to my Trello board that I look at every single day. Shall I read it out?
Please do, yes.
The quote that I look at every single day is, actually, I can't even remember where I got this from. I think it was from a Medium article that I stumbled upon, but this just resonated with me. So I don't know who the author is, and I'm sorry for not being able to attribute it to you, but thank you for this quote. So the quote is, "Busyness is a sign of poverty that will eventually lead to personal bankruptcy. If you say I'm busy a lot, it's a red flag. Stop being so freaking busy, prioritize 2 to 3 goals and ditch the rest. Focus is what removes hocus pocus BS tasks from your life." So
love it.
I've shared this with quite a few of my team, actually. And the reason why I pin that to my Trello board and I look at it every single day is that when people used to ask me how I was, I quite often or invariably used to say, yeah, I'm great, but it's really busy. What does that mean? Like, what are you busy on? Why are you busy? What impact is that having? And I pin that there because I genuinely believe, kind of going back to the plan the night before kind of habit, that if you can bring what you need to do back to the top 2 to 3 things, it gives you that sense of focus, that clarity. It is genuinely...
It's a brilliant quote. And it's such an interesting reason why, because now you've made me think, when you do say, people go, how's things going? If there's some small talk at the beginning of a video call or something, you kind of say, oh yeah, but very busy. But I wonder if it's because people would rather say that than say, do you know what? I've managed my time superbly and I'm just nicely easing my way through my day task by task. It doesn't sound as, people don't like to hear that you're possibly just doing well in terms of your time management. People like to think of like, being hectic, and it's probably just, it's a psychological block, isn't it?
Potentially. And I'm sure there is a wider, psychological study that one could do in the working environment around this need for people to kind of look and be busy. And, there were plenty of articles about this in post-COVID in the remote working setup, right? Where leaders weren't sure what the productivity was of their people. This is that kind of area of narrative that has to come back to outcomes. What are the outcomes that individuals are achieving? It might not matter actually that they're not very busy if they're achieving the absolutely right outcomes that take you and your business in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. And then in the spirit of, I guess, sort of snowball networking and, maybe just like carrying on the next show, who would you recommend, Piers, that we have on our show next?
Oh, great question. So
it can't be yourself.
Wasn't going to be page 2, remember?
Page 2.
So I genuinely find a gentleman called David Birch, who is a very, very well-esteemed financial commentator, one of the most interesting, well-informed people in this entire financial services space. He is a fantastic orator, communicator, and distiller of really, really complex information to the simple. And I just have the hugest amounts of respect. I love seeing him from time to time at conferences. But yeah.
Fantastic. Right. Well, I'm reaching out to David, and I'm gonna attach that reference as well to the outreach. And then finally, Piers, what's your mana? So what's your superpower? What's your magic? It could be something like resilience. It could be an ability to test and fail and keep plodding on. What would you say your particular mana is?
Well, I know I've just mentioned sort of focus as a superpower, but I suppose when I was thinking about this, I would say that my mana is the power of visualization, actually. I guess simply, if I were to describe it to my 5-year-old, I would say that I can see into the future. But I think this is a process, a practice, a method maybe of being able to create this internal image of what you want to be, what you want to do, what outcome you want to achieve. And it is a technique that genuinely anyone can practice, anyone can be coached on, but again, comes back to, I suppose, the mindset part of this formula. If you think of kind of success is like method times by mindset, maybe like we talked about the habit side as well as the coachable side of things. This is a process. It's a technique that anyone can practice and anyone can be coached on, but it's up to the individual to go and actually do. I was thinking about why this was important to me, but from a little kid, I was kind of taught how to do this by my parents, thankfully, very fortunately. I used to be quite a good runner and athlete, and I used to do the high jump. My dad, I've got really, really clear memories of my dad telling me to pause at the start of a run up to a high jump and think about the curve of the arc that I was going to run through and how I was actually going to jump over the high jump bar. Now, I was never that good at the high jump. I mean, I competed at kind of school level, but it was that technique of visualizing what you are about to go and do or what you want to do. And invariably, I'd get over that bar when I had visualized myself getting over it. And when I had visualized myself stumbling, more often than not, the bar came off. My mum did similar things actually as a kid. And I think I've seen this in so many different working examples, actually. Like it starts with, planning your week. It starts with thinking about what you want to achieve by the end of a quarter or a year. I had a very, very good coach who also asked me to visualize where I wanted to be in 1 year's time. And then he asked my future self to give my current self feedback on what I would change. And, that is this power of visualization, putting yourself in the situation that you want to be in.
Yeah.
And invariably, kind of creating that blueprint of where you want to get to, what you want to do, what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
Allows you to get that clarity in your own mind of like, okay, this is how I do it. And I know that when I've done this in the past, I've invariably achieved something similar to what I had set out to do. And when I haven't, it has felt a bit like wandering in the wilderness. And I do really think this is one of those areas that you can apply to all sorts of things. I do this with my reports from a coaching perspective. There's product management, articles about like the Amazon working backwards technique. Imagine you've just launched this product and describe how successful it is and work backwards from there. But
Yeah,
it is the power of putting yourself in that future state, thinking about how that feels, what are the emotions that you're going through, and then working backwards from that to figure out the actual path towards achieving that thing.
the power of visualization. It's a fantastic mana. It just coincidentally, it brought me onto I for some reason, I think, as you know, sometimes you fall into a kind of a YouTube hole or something. I came across Matthew McConaughey's Oscar acceptance speech from a few years ago, and he said in that speech that his hero is him 10 years time. So like he's always like picturing, where do I want to be in 10 years time, and aiming for that. And the thing is, you never get there. So you never get to where you want to be, because you're always focusing further on the future. And it's not exactly the same, but I think it's kind of linked to the same mentality.
I love that. I haven't come across that. I'm going to go and find that YouTube hole as well and watch that video. But it's exactly that. And I think this comes back to what we've touched on, right? We all are individually responsible for ourselves. Sounds like an incredible truism, but if we don't stop and pause and think about that future self, no one else is really going to do that. Or if they do, it can come across as sort of advice and suggestions that you then may choose to follow or not. This has to come back to yourself, starting from within yourself, thinking about what it is you're trying to achieve. And yeah, I love giving yourself a bit of that advice from 10 years time.
If you'd said to me before this show that we'd have finished up talking about Matthew McConaughey, I would have said that's gone down a very strange.
We did it.
Piers, that amazing to chat with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Just finish up. Is there anything that you'd like to finish on, to pitch, to promote, whatever it might be? Now's the time.
Yeah, I'll finish on maybe going full circle on coming back to Visa cross-border solutions. So pretty much everyone who is listening will have heard of Visa. I'm sure if you open your wallet or your digital wallet, you've got a Visa card. But Visa cross-border solutions you may not have heard of. We launched in September this year, and it is really the coming together of Visa's homegrown best-in-class cash management cross-border capabilities, previously known as Visa Treasury as a Service, with the Currencycloud platform that, as we said, was acquired in 2021. And we are really on this mission to provide best-in-class cross-border solutions and experiences to banks, to fintechs, to FX brokers, corporates and payment institutions around the world, but ultimately to try and transform the way that people and businesses are paying and being paid around the world. So a small plug to a new part of Visa.
Well, fantastic. We'll happily put some links in the show notes as well, Piers. But once again, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Future of Work podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave a like and a review and subscribe to our iTunes channel to stay up to date with the newest content. Find us on social media at Searching for Mana. Tell us who you want next on the show. Thanks again, and see you next time.